The day my mother-in-law died, she took the truth with her, or so I thought. That was the sentence that kept circling in my mind as I stood in her living room, the late afternoon light stretching across the carpet like long, tired fingers. I remember the smell first. That bitter blend of old lavender sachets and mothballs she kept tucked into every drawer, every cabinet, every pocket of the house. It was the scent of a woman who guarded everything she owned with a clenched fist. My fingers were trembling, though I kept them tucked into the pockets of my coat, so no one would see. My husband, Daniel, hovered at the doorway, his voice low, his posture all awkward angles. He'd always shrunk around her, even as a grown man. Some people outgrow childhood fear. My husband only learned to hide it. His sister, Marianne, was already crying, the loud kind of crying that demands an audience. Her perfectly manicured nails dragged a tissue across her cheeks with all the finesse of someone performing grief instead of feeling it.
And me?
I was just standing there, quiet, a polite daughter-in-law who never caused waves. The one she used to introduce to her friends as my son's wife, as if saying my name cost her something she wasn't willing to give. But that day, she had left me something no one expected, even me. And the moment that truth came to light, the moment her attorney cleared his throat and announced it, I felt the entire room shift, like someone had opened a window in a house that had been sealed for too long. But let me not rush ahead of myself, baby. Stories like this, you gotta walk through them slow. One foot in front of the other, just like I did. Let me take you back. Before everything unraveled, life in our home was simple. Not perfect. No home is perfect, but steady in the way that makes you feel safe enough to exhale at the end of the day. I worked at a small urban nursery, the kind where you track dirt home in the creases of your palms and go to bed smelling faintly of basil and damp soil. Daniel worked as an accountant, quiet job for a quiet man. Our apartment was small but warm, tucked above a bakery that filled our kitchen every morning with the smell of rising dough and toasted sugar. We used to sit at the little two-person table, sipping coffee as the city woke below us. I loved those mornings. They felt like a whispered secret between the two of us. But his mother, well, she was a presence even when she wasn't physically there. A shadow that lingered behind us like the echo of a closing door. Her name was Loretta. And if you ever met a woman who could silence a room simply by inhaling, that was her. She was tall, elegant in that brittle way where every outfit seemed stiff with starch and expectation. Her voice carried a tone that said she had already judged you before you opened your mouth. And yet, for reasons I never fully understood, she chose to dislike me not subtly but openly, the way one might dislike humidity or slow drivers. When I first married Daniel, I truly tried with her. I'd bring over fresh bread from the bakery downstairs. I'd offer to help fold laundry, clean her pantry, drive her to appointments. But every gesture slid off her like water on wax. "Oh, that's not necessary," she'd say, which really meant, "Don't touch my things." Once, I complimented an old photograph on her mantel, Daniel as a toddler, clutching her skirt with chubby hands. She snatched the frame from my fingers and wiped it clean where I'd touched it. "I just polished it," she'd said. I learned not to touch anything after that. Over time, I shifted from trying to please her to simply trying not to irritate her. But even that felt like walking across cracked ice. She had 2 children, Daniel and Marianne. And if you ask me, though no one ever did, Marianne was more like her than Daniel ever was. Sharp, entitled, hungry for approval even after she'd already gotten it. The 3 of them had a way of speaking to each other that made me feel like a guest in my own marriage, like there was a family language I never learned fully. But despite everything, I still visited, still showed up, still offered kindness even when she returned only coldness. Maybe I was naive. Maybe I was raised to believe that if you keep giving softness, eventually it melts someone's edges. I didn't know yet that some edges aren't meant to soften. I remember the last lunch I ever had with her. She'd made chicken salad, dry, over-peppered, the kind she insisted was the proper way. She sat across from me with her spine perfectly straight, her silverware set in neat parallel. The air between us was always too quiet, like the house was holding its breath. "I assume you know," she said suddenly, without looking up from her plate. "Know what?" "That I've arranged everything for when the time comes." I swallowed. "Your will, you mean?" She dabbed her mouth with a napkin.
"Yes."
"There will be no confusion. No surprises. I've made sure of that." She said it pointedly, and I, fool that I was, thought she meant it as reassurance. That she was trying to ease my mind. I didn't know she was setting the stage. I didn't know she was lying. And I certainly didn't know that day would be the last time I'd hear her speak at all. Because 3 weeks later, she suffered a massive stroke. Gone before any of us understood what was happening. Daniel cried for hours, his shoulders shaking in a way I'd never seen before. Mary and collapsed dramatically at the hospital desk. I held their coats, their bags, their grief, the way I always held the things this family didn't want to carry. And even then, even in death, I never imagined she'd leave anything to me. Why would she? I thought I knew my place in her world. I was wrong. Very wrong. Because the first clue, the first whisper of something hidden, came the night before the reading of the will. And looking back now, I should have seen it. I should have felt it in the pit of my stomach. But I didn't. Not yet. The night before the will was read, I couldn't sleep. Not because I expected anything, Lord knows I didn't, but because Daniel had been so strangely quiet all day. Not the soft, thoughtful quiet he usually lived in, but something heavier, something that pulled the air down around him. After dinner, he sat on the edge of the bed with his shoulders hunched forward, his elbows on his knees, his fingers threaded together like he was praying without realizing it. The lamp cast a warm amber halo over him, but his face looked drawn, tired in a way grief alone didn't explain. "Baby," I said softly, touching his back. "You okay?" He inhaled, slow and deep, but didn't look at me. "Just thinking." "About tomorrow?" He nodded, though his jaw flexed tight, like he wanted to say more but swallowed it back down. I eased onto the bed beside him. "It's going to be hard."
"I know.
"But you don't have to carry this all on your own." He finally lifted his gaze to mine. And that's when I saw it, something flickering behind his eyes that wasn't grief. It wasn't anger. It wasn't confusion.
It was dread."
"Did your mom ever mention anything to you about her will?" he asked. His voice was too careful, too controlled. I frowned a little. "Not really. She told me she had everything arranged. That's all." He nodded again, but it was an absent nod, the kind someone gives when the answer isn't the one they were hoping for. I thought that was the end of it. But he stayed quiet. Too quiet. Finally, I said, "Dan, why are you asking me that?" He didn't respond right away. His eyes drifted toward the floor, then to the window, then to his hands. He looked like a man trying to approach a truth from different angles, hoping one angle would make it hurt less. "She wasn't," he began, then stopped. "She wasn't always fair." He said it like he was confessing a sin. I squeezed his hand. "Your mom had her ways, yes, but she loved you. In her own manner." He huffed a soft, humorless breath. "Sometimes I wished she didn't. Would have been easier." I didn't know what that meant. Not yet, but there wasn't space in him that night for questions. Not the deep kind, anyway. So I leaned my head on his shoulder, and we just sat together in silence, listening to the bakery downstairs prepare for the morning, the hum of the ovens, the muted thump of dough against a wooden table. Later, long after he'd fallen asleep, I lay awake staring at the ceiling. His words kept echoing. "Did your mom ever mention anything to you about her will?" Why would he ask me that? What did he expect me to say? And why did he look like he was preparing himself for something unpleasant? I let those questions roll around my mind like loose marbles until the sun finally began to lighten the edges of the window. The next morning, the air felt different. Heavy. Not just with grief. Funerals have their own weight, but with something else I couldn't name yet. We arrived at Loretta's house early because Daniel insisted on it. Marianne pulled up a few minutes later, wearing dark sunglasses though the sky was overcast. She stepped out of her car with a kind of stiff drama, like a widow in an old movie, even though she wasn't the one who'd lost a spouse. I offered a small smile. "Morning, Marianne."
She didn't respond.
Didn't even glance my way. just walked straight past me and into the house. I felt my cheeks warm, but I brushed it off. Grief makes people strange. I tried to give her grace. Inside the house, the attorney was already setting up papers on the dining table. He was a tidy, thin man with silver-framed glasses and a nervous sort of politeness. He stood when we entered. "Mrs. Henderson," he greeted me first. It startled me. Nobody ever used my name in that family unless necessary. Then I caught it. Mary Ann's eyes sharpened at the sound. She looked at me like she was seeing me for the first time that morning, and not in a good way. That was the first moment I felt something shift. Not enough to alarm me. Not yet. Just enough to plant a little seed of unease. The second clue came when we were all seated, waiting for the attorney to begin. He opened a manila folder, cleared his throat, and asked, "Before we start, are all beneficiaries present?" Mary Ann straightened her back. "It's just us, her children." The attorney blinked.
Ah.
"Actually." But before he could finish, Daniel cut in. "Just read it," he said tightly. His sister looked between them, confused, but neither of the men elaborated. I sat there still, small, trying not to interrupt the silent tension crawling across the room. Beneficiaries? Plural? I brushed it off, telling myself what any reasonable woman would. Loretta was wealthy enough to leave donations to charities, maybe friends. That was all it meant. But even with that excuse, something in my chest fluttered uneasily. And then came the final clue. The one I didn't recognize as a warning until much later. As the attorney shuffled his papers, preparing to begin the formal reading, he paused and looked up at me. Not at Daniel.
Not at Mary Ann. At me.
He offered a small, almost apologetic nod.
I didn't understand it then.
But looking back now, that was the moment everything began. That tiny nod. That quiet acknowledgement that the room and our lives were about to tilt in a direction none of us expected. I shifted in my chair, my palms damp, my heartbeat quickening for reasons I couldn't explain. Daniel exhaled shakily. Mary Ann tapped her fingernails against the table, growing impatient, and the attorney cleared his throat once more. "This is the last will and testament of Loretta May Henderson." I folded my hands in my lap, completely unaware that my life was about to split open. If you've ever been in a room where truth comes too fast, you know that feeling, like the air pulls back from your body, like something in your chest braces before your mind does. That's what happened as the attorney began reading. His voice was steady, almost soothing, yet every word clanged in that quiet dining room like a hammer striking metal. "I, Loretta May Henderson, being of sound mind, do hereby declare this to be my last will and testament." I watched Daniel's leg bounce beneath the table, a nervous habit he'd had since childhood. Mary Ann had folded her arms, one eyebrow raised in a dramatic arch, as though she expected to be disappointed. But I sat there with no expectations at all, because I truly believed none of this had anything to do with me. The first shock. The attorney continued down the formal lines of the document, the sort of language that feels cold even in grief. It wasn't until we reached the section titled Distribution of Property that he paused. The pause was brief, barely half a breath, but enough to thicken the air. He cleared his throat lightly. Item 1. I leave my jewelry collection, including heirloom pieces from the Henderson and Lowell families, to my daughter, Mary Ann Lee Henderson. Mary Ann lifted her chin, as if that were no more than her birthright. I expected that. She expected that. Everyone did. Item 2, he continued. I leave my vintage book collection and all items stored in the library room to my son, Daniel Ray Henderson. Daniel nodded, though his face didn't soften. He'd always loved that library. He used to tell me the smell of old pages reminded him of childhood. The safe parts, not the painful ones. Still nothing unusual, just the normal distribution of a mother's belongings. But then we reached the part that shifted the atmosphere so sharply, it felt like the room itself inhaled. The attorney's voice deepened, became measured. Item 3. I leave the total balance of my savings accounts, along with all bonds, certificates, and financial holdings. Mary Ann leaned forward. Daniel stiffened. To my daughter-in-law, the attorney finished. It took a second for the words to reach me.
To sink in.
To even make sense. To your what? Marian spat, her voice sharp enough to slice glass. The attorney blinked behind his glasses. To my daughter-in-law. That is what is written. Marianne whipped her head toward me.
No.
That can't be right. Her stare could have burned holes into my skin. I swallowed, my breath catching in my throat. I think there must be some mistake. But the attorney continued without interruption. Item 4. I leave my home. Located at 72 McKinley Drive, including all property within and adjacent to it, exclusively to my daughter-in-law, Mrs. Eliza May Henderson. Everything in me went still. Silence hit the room like a physical force. Marianne's mouth fell open in disbelief. Daniel's hands tightened into fists on his thighs. And me? I felt something like heat flood my cheeks, my heartbeat pounding so loudly I could hear it in my ears. The attorney went on, but his voice sounded distant now, like I was underwater. Item 5. I designate my daughter-in-law as the executor of this estate. Executor? My vision blurred around the edges. Executor meant responsibility. Executor meant control. Executor meant the one his mother trusted. But she never trusted me. Never even pretended to. Why would she? The question was too big to fit inside my mind. What kind of joke is this? Marianne slapped her palm onto the table. It isn't a joke, the attorney said quietly. This is the signed, notarized document. She prepared it approximately 2 months before her passing. 2 months. Daniel's voice cracked slightly. She changed it recently? The attorney nodded.
Yes.
She made substantial revisions from the prior version. Marianne barked a laugh. Bitter. Disbelieving. This doesn't make sense. Why would mother leave everything to her? She didn't even like her. I flinched at the truth of that. The attorney folded his hands. Mrs. Henderson arrived at my office alone. She was very clear in her decisions. I asked her repeatedly if she wished to reconsider the distributions, given family dynamics. She insisted. I felt dizzy. My hands trembled in my lap. This woman, this cold, critical woman who never let me forget I was just the daughter-in-law, the outsider, had left me her entire estate?
Why?
I didn't know. I couldn't even begin to guess. Everything inside me whispered that something was wrong. Terribly wrong. Daniel's silence. I turned to Daniel, desperate for something, clarity, comfort, explanation. But his face was unreadable, expressionless in a way that frightened me. He wasn't shocked. Not the way Marianne was. Not the way I was. He looked resigned. Like he had expected this. Or feared it. Baby? I whispered. He didn't answer. Just kept staring at the table as if it held a truth he wasn't ready to confront. Marianne loses control. This is ridiculous. Marianne snapped, pushing up from her chair so fast it screeched against the floor. I want to see the documents. The actual documents. Now. You may review them, the attorney said calmly. But they are legally binding. She snatched the pages from his hands and scanned them, her face twisting with every line she read. This handwriting, she always had terrible handwriting, but this signature, she squinted, then thrust the paper at me as if I'd done something wrong. This can't be real. It is real, the attorney replied. Marianne's voice rose an octave. She wouldn't do this. Not to her own children. The attorney straightened slightly. Ms. Henderson, you're still receiving certain assets. Old jewelry and dusty books, she shrieked. She gave everything else to her? I didn't say a word. My throat was too tight. My mind too foggy. Marianne's chest heaved. Mother must have been manipulated.
Poisoned. Confused.
Something. Her eyes locked onto mine with such ferocity that I instinctively leaned back. You did this, she hissed. My heart clenched.
No.
Marianne, I swear I didn't even know. Oh, save it.
You fooled her somehow.
You took advantage of her. Her voice was shaking now, not from fury alone, but from something much deeper.
Fear. Loss.
And maybe the first taste of a world where she wasn't the chosen one. The attorney lifted a hand. Ms. Henderson, please. There is no evidence of manipulation. Your mother was alert and coherent during every meeting. Marian lowered herself back into her chair, but her glare never left me. She would never choose you. Never. Her words felt like small stones thrown at my chest. Not because of the insult. I could ignore insults. But because part of me agreed. Why did she choose me? Why, after all those years of disapproval, there was something we weren't seeing. Something unsaid. Something buried. And I felt, in that moment, that whatever truth lay beneath this decision, it wasn't going to stay buried for long. The room felt colder. Daniel finally stood up slowly, his hands trembling slightly. "We're done," he murmured. But his voice wasn't directed at the attorney. It wasn't directed at Marianne. It was directed at me.
And I didn't know what that meant.
Not yet. But I was about to find out. Because this wasn't the end of the betrayal. It was only the beginning. We left the attorney's office in silence. Not the comfortable silence two people share when they understand each other without speaking.
No.
This was the kind of silence that builds walls. The kind that fills the space between two people with questions too sharp to touch. Daniel walked ahead of me, his steps clipped, his shoulders tense beneath his jacket. I followed 3 paces behind, feeling like a shadow trailing a man I loved but didn't fully recognize in that moment. When we reached the car, he didn't open my door like he usually did. Just slid into the driver's seat and gripped the steering wheel with both hands, staring straight ahead as though the road might offer him answers he couldn't find inside himself. I eased into the passenger seat and closed the door quietly. The stillness was suffocating. "Daniel," I said finally, my voice a fragile thread.
He didn't look at me.
"Let's just get home." There was no anger in his tone. No accusation. Just a tiredness that scared me more than anger would've. We drove in heavy silence, the kind that settles into your bones. I watched the city blur past the window, gray buildings, flickering traffic lights, pedestrians moving with the certainty of people who still believed their world made sense. Mine didn't. Not anymore. When we reached our apartment, Daniel moved through the rooms like a man underwater, slow, muted, detached. I followed behind him helplessly. He tossed his keys on the counter and sank into one of the kitchen chairs. I sat across from him, hands folded on the table between us, waiting for him to say something, anything. But he kept staring down at the wood grain beneath his fingers. Finally, I whispered, "Talk to me."
His jaw tightened.
"I don't know what to say." "You're upset." He nodded once. "You think I did something wrong." He didn't respond, but the way he exhaled, that long, shaky exhale, told me enough. I reached across the table for his hand, but he pulled it back before I touched him. The rejection stung more than I expected. "Daniel," I tried again. "I didn't even know she changed her will. I swear." He closed his eyes, rubbing the bridge of his nose. "I know you didn't. Rationally, I know that. But what?" He hesitated, and when he finally looked at me, his eyes were full of so many conflicting emotions I could barely read them. "Why you?" he asked. "Why would she leave everything to you? She barely spoke to you. She never respected you." The words weren't meant to be cruel, but they landed like blows anyway. "I know," I whispered. "I don't understand it either." He leaned back in his chair, staring up at the ceiling like he was waiting for something to make sense. "You don't know my mother like I did." I blinked. "What do you mean?" He shook his head. "She didn't do things without reason. She controlled everything. Every detail. Every outcome. She planned her life like a chess game." There was a heaviness in his voice, a bitterness I'd only glimpsed before. "But this," he continued, "this was deliberate. A message. And I don't know what she was trying to say." I took a slow breath. Is it possible she was trying to make amends? Maybe this was her way of... "No," he cut in quickly, voice hard. "She didn't do amends. She didn't do grace. Not with me. Not with anyone." The room felt colder after he said that. He pushed away from the table and paced to the window, bracing one hand on the frame. I thought I was prepared for her death. I thought I understood her. But now, he swallowed. I don't know what she wanted. Pain twisted in my chest at the vulnerability in his voice. I rose slowly and stepped toward him. Then let's find out together. But before I could reach him, before I could offer even the smallest comfort, there was a sudden pounding at the door. Sharp, urgent, aggressive. Daniel stiffened. I felt my stomach drop. He didn't have to open the door for us to know who it was. Marianne. Daniel opened the door anyway, because that's who he was. Too gentle, too accommodating, always bending under the force of other people's storms. Marianne stood on the threshold, her makeup smudged, her hair slightly disheveled. She looked like she had aged 10 years in the last 2 hours. Her eyes darted past Daniel and landed on me. You, she hissed. We need to talk. Daniel stepped in front of me instinctively, but she pushed past him into our apartment. You had something to do with this, she said, her voice trembling. I know you did. I didn't, I answered softly. Mother hated you, she shouted, tears springing back into her eyes. She never trusted you, never relied on you. Why would she give you everything? Why? I wanted to say I didn't know. I wanted to say I was just as confused. But before I could speak, something in Marianne's expression shifted, a flash of realization, then suspicion, then something much darker. Her gaze moved from me to Daniel. Did she know something? Marianne asked him. Something about the two of you? Daniel's face went pale. What are you talking about? Maybe, she said, stepping toward him, her voice lowering to a poisonous whisper. Maybe Mother saw something she didn't like. Maybe that's why she... Stop, Daniel snapped, louder than I'd ever heard him speak to her. She recoiled, as if slapped. But then she smiled. A small, cruel smile that chilled me. Oh, she said softly. She knew something. That's it, isn't it? Daniel didn't respond. He couldn't. He just stood there, frozen, his face gray with dread. My heart began to pound. What is she talking about? I whispered. Daniel blinked rapidly, as if trying to push back tears. Nothing. She's just being cruel. But Marianne cut him off with a single sentence. A sentence that would tear open everything I thought I understood about my marriage. Mother said you weren't fit to inherit anything, Marianne said. She told me that months ago. She said you'd betrayed your responsibilities as a husband. The room went absolutely still. My breath caught. Daniel's eyes widened with panic. And deep inside me, something cold and ancient whispered. This is about more than inheritance. This is about something Daniel has been hiding. Something his mother knew. Suddenly, the will wasn't the only secret in the room. There was another. Darker. Closer. Inside my own home. I didn't speak. Not at first. Not because I didn't want to, but because I couldn't. My voice had retreated somewhere deep inside me, hiding behind the shock curling slowly through my chest. Daniel stared at Marianne as though she'd struck him. Get out, he whispered. Marianne crossed her arms, almost triumphant in her cruelty. I'm not leaving until... Get out. It wasn't a shout this time. It was a command. Cold, final, stripped of everything that once tied them together as siblings. For a moment, Marianne seemed shaken by it. Then she lifted her chin and stepped back toward the door. But before leaving, she turned to me. Her eyes were red and swollen, but they gleamed with the feverish conviction of someone who finally found a weapon sharp enough to draw blood. Whatever he's hiding, she said softly, it's worse than you think. Then she walked out. Daniel shut the door behind her with a trembling hand. The moment the latch clicked, silence crashed over us again. Not the suffocating silence from earlier. No. This one was jagged. Loaded. Dangerous. I stared at Daniel's back as he leaned his forehead against the door, shoulders shaking. Daniel, I whispered, what is she talking about? He didn't turn, didn't move, didn't breathe. Tell me, I said again, louder this time. Please. He dragged a hand down his face and turned slowly. His eyes were brimming with a pain I didn't understand, one I'd never seen him let anyone see. Not even me.
She's lying, he said.
Trying to twist things. Trying to. Stop. My voice surprised us both. It wasn't angry. It wasn't hysterical. It was steady. Terrifyingly steady. Don't lie to me, I said. Not right now. Daniel's throat bobbed. He stepped toward me, hands open as if approaching a wounded animal. I never betrayed you. I wanted to believe him.
God, I wanted to.
But something in his eyes, fear, guilt, panic, kept me rooted in place. Your mother said you betrayed your responsibilities as a husband, I said. What does that mean? He shook his head and reached for my hands. This time, I stepped back. The hurt on his face broke something inside me. Please, he whispered. Let me explain. Then explain. He exhaled shakily. Not like this. Not after everything that just happened. I need a minute.
I stared at him.
A minute. That was what he wanted. A minute to decide how much of the truth to give me. A minute to edit the story. A minute to choose which pieces of himself he could reveal without losing me. No, I said softly. No more minutes. No more waiting. No more secrets. Tears filled his eyes. You're scared, he said quietly. And I understand. But I promise you, whatever you think this is, it's not what Mary Ann wants you to believe. Then tell me what it is. His hands curled into fists at his sides. And then suddenly he laughed. Not a real laugh. A broken, disbelieving exhale. I can't do this right now, he muttered. Not after the will. Not after her. I can't think straight. My breath hitched. So you're choosing not to tell me. I'm choosing, he stopped, squeezing his eyes shut. I'm choosing not to say something I'll regret. Something he'd regret. The phrasing lodged in my chest like a shard of glass. What? I said quietly. Are you not saying, Daniel? He opened his eyes. And for the first time since I'd known him, he didn't look like my husband. He looked like a stranger wearing his face. I need to be alone, he said. A simple sentence. But it felt like the world shifted beneath me when he said it. You're pushing me away, I whispered. I'm trying to protect us. From what? He didn't answer. And that was answer enough. I walked past him into the bedroom, because if I stayed in that room a second longer, I was afraid I'd break apart. He didn't follow.
Didn't call after me. Didn't try to stop me.
Closing the bedroom door felt like sealing myself inside a different universe. I leaned against it, sliding slowly to the floor, my breath catching in my throat. This morning, I'd had a husband.
A home.
A life that made sense. By afternoon, I'd inherited a fortune I didn't want, gained enemies I didn't ask for, and lost a truth I hadn't even known was fragile. I waited for the sound of Daniel knocking. But the minutes stretched into an hour, then two. Nothing. No footsteps. No apology. No explanation. Just silence. At some point, exhaustion dragged me onto the bed. I told myself I wouldn't fall asleep. But grief is heavy. And silence is a lullaby you don't choose. When I finally woke, moonlight washed the room in cold silver. The apartment was quiet. Too quiet. I sat up, heart pounding. Daniel? No answer. I padded into the hallway. His phone was still on the kitchen counter. His jacket still on the chair. His keys still in the bowl. But he was gone. My chest tightened. Daniel? I called again, louder this time. Still nothing. I checked the bathroom. Empty. The study. Empty. The balcony. Empty. He hadn't taken anything. Not his wallet. Not his shoes. Not even his wedding ring. It was sitting on the nightstand on his side of the bed. My hands began to shake. Where do you go when you leave everything behind? Why do you walk out without your ring? Without your keys? Without your phone? Because you aren't planning to go far? Or because you're planning to disappear? I found the note an hour later. Folded neatly. Tucked inside the drawer where he kept old receipts and loose batteries. As if he wanted me to find it only after I'd searched everywhere else. My name was written on the front in his handwriting. Hands trembling, I opened it. 5 words. Just 5. 5 that felt like they shifted the entire axis of my world. I didn't want this life. No explanation. No apology. No promise to return. Just a truth I didn't know how to understand. A truth that hurt more than any lie. I didn't remember falling to the floor. 1 second, I was standing in the doorway of our apartment, staring at the note Daniel left behind, the one with only 4 words written in that familiar slanted handwriting. I'm sorry. I can't. The next second, my knees simply gave out. I sat on the cool hardwood, breathing like the air had suddenly grown thick, like it had weight. My fingers shook so hard I almost dropped the paper again. The apartment felt too quiet, empty in a way that went beyond physical absence. A silence created by someone leaving, not just the space, but the life you shared.
My tears came slow at first.
Almost polite. But then they rose all at once, like water breaching a dam, spilling over into messy, gasping sobs that scraped my throat raw. I clutched the note to my chest, my forehead pressing against my knees. I kept whispering, "No, no, no," like if I repeated it enough, I could undo what had already happened. The clock on the wall ticked steadily, mercilessly. A reminder that time doesn't stop, even when your world does. I don't know how long I stayed on the floor. It might have been minutes. It might have been hours. But eventually my phone rang. A sharp, brittle sound that made my whole body flinch. I wiped my face with trembling hands and reached for it. The caller ID showed a number I didn't recognize, local but unfamiliar. For a moment, I considered letting it ring, letting the world handle itself without me for once. But something in my gut urged me to answer. "Hello." My voice was hoarse, small. There was a pause on the other end. Then a woman's voice, steady, warm, and strangely gentle. "Is this Daniel Carter's wife?" My heart thudded, painfully.
Yes.
"Who is this?" "My name is Evelyn," she said softly. "Evelyn Marsh. I'm a counselor at the Grayson Community Center." "A counselor?" My pulse quickened. "I'm sorry, this is unexpected," I murmured. "Is something wrong?" Another pause. Longer this time. Then, with a grave kindness that made my stomach twist, "I think your husband may have reached out to us earlier today." I shot upright on the floor, gripping the phone so tightly my knuckles hurt. He what?" "Yes," she said quietly. "He came to our evening walk-in hours around 6. He left before I could speak to him, but he filled out a preliminary intake form." A cold wave rolled through me. "Why?" I whispered. Her voice softened even further. "People come to us when they feel overwhelmed, when they don't know where else to go." I closed my eyes, feeling my chest tighten. "Did he say what he needed?" "No," she replied gently. "He didn't leave any details, but he did list an emergency contact."
She paused.
"And he put your name." Something inside me cracked then, a soundless breaking, like a thin piece of glass giving way beneath pressure. I pressed my hand against my mouth, trying to hold myself together. "Is he?" I swallowed hard. "Is he still there? Did you talk to him? Did he say where he was going?" "I'm sorry," she murmured. "He left abruptly. He rushed out after writing just 2 sentences." The silence between us felt like the moment before a devastating truth. "What sentences?" I asked. A rustle of papers on her end. Then she read them softly, almost reverently. "I can't keep the secret anymore. She deserves the truth." The floor beneath me felt like it shifted. "What secret?" My voice cracked on the last word. "We don't know," Evelyn said. "But if he comes back, we'll encourage him to contact you. And for what it's worth, he looked like a man who still loved his wife very much." I closed my eyes, tears slipping down my cheeks. "Thank you," I whispered. "Take care of yourself tonight," she said. Then the call ended. But the words she'd spoken kept echoing in my mind like a slow, haunting drumbeat. He looked like a man who still loved his wife. I can't keep the secret anymore. She deserves the truth. My breath came uneven, shallow. The note. The will. His mother's cryptic insult. Marianne's accusation. The panic in Daniel's eyes. It all braided itself into a single, terrifying possibility. Whatever Daniel was hiding, it wasn't about infidelity. It wasn't about money. It wasn't about loyalty to his mother. It was something else. Something that had been eating him alive. And now it was coming to the surface. I stood shaky, unsteady, and walked to our bedroom. The space felt different without him. Like a room breathing in a new rhythm. Like the absence had carved out its own shape. I sat on the edge of the bed, staring at his nightstand. He wasn't careless. Daniel was the kind of man who folded receipts, placed coins into small bowls, organized everything with quiet care. But tonight, his drawer was slightly open.
Just barely.
I reached out and pulled it open. Inside was the order of his life. His watch, cufflinks, folded pocket squares, a pen his father had given him, and a small brown envelope. It had my name on it. My breath hitched as I picked it up. My name was written in that same slanted handwriting, the one that had left me the forward note in the kitchen. I held the envelope for a long moment, feeling its weight. It wasn't thick, but it felt heavy, like whatever sat inside it carried more than paper. My heart pounded as I slid a finger beneath the flap and opened it. Inside was a single page, folded twice. My hands trembled violently as I opened it. The handwriting was uneven, not the controlled, steady script Daniel normally used. The first line hit me like a physical blow. "There's something you never knew about my mother." My throat tightened. I kept reading, my eyes scanning each line with growing shock, fear, and a dawning understanding that shifted the entire foundation of everything I thought I knew. She didn't hate you. She blamed me. For what happened. For the reason she changed the will. For the reason she could never look you in the eyes. I swallowed hard. Then came the line that made my whole body go cold. "I never betrayed you. I betrayed someone else. And the truth has been killing me for years." I didn't realize I was crying until a tear splashed onto the paper. My hands were shaking too hard to keep reading. I forced myself to continue. "I promise I'll tell you everything. I need a little more time. Please don't give up on me." No signature. No explanation. Just that. I sank onto the bed, gripping the letter with both hands, as if holding it tighter would somehow pull him back to me. But it didn't. I was alone. With a secret I didn't understand. With a will that didn't make sense. With a husband spiraling somewhere beyond my reach. I looked at the last line again. "Please don't give up on me." But the truth was, I didn't even know what I was holding on to anymore. I didn't sleep that night. I lay on top of the covers, Daniel's letter clutched in my hand, the room washed in the blue-gray light of the street lamp outside our window. Every few minutes, a car would pass, and the headlights would glide across the ceiling, slow, ghost-like, illuminating the space where his body should have been. I counted them, one by one, anything to keep from thinking too deeply, too quickly, too dangerously. But thoughts don't wait for permission. They seep in through the cracks. By dawn, the exhaustion felt like a physical weight on my chest. My eyes burned, my throat felt scraped raw from crying. I dragged myself into the kitchen, turned on the kettle, and nearly jumped out of my skin when there was a loud knock at the door. Not pounding this time. Just a firm, authoritative knock. I froze. Something in my gut said this wasn't family. Wasn't a neighbor. Wasn't a friend. I slowly made my way to the door. When I looked through the peephole, my stomach dropped. 2 police officers. A man and a woman. Uniformed. Serious.
"Come."
I opened the door with trembling fingers. "Mrs. Carter?" the woman asked gently. My voice barely held. "Yes." "We're sorry to bother you so early," the man said. "May we come in for a moment?" My knees felt weak. Because police don't show up at your door at dawn unless something has gone wrong. Horribly wrong. I stepped aside. Is this about my husband?" I asked, my heart thudding so loudly I could hear it in my ears. The officers exchanged a look, subtle but unmistakable. The woman nodded. "We believe it may be." My breath caught. Did something happen to him?" No, the man said quickly, raising a hand. "Nothing like that. He's not hurt. And as far as we know, he's not in immediate danger." My body sagged against the back of the couch in relief. Not hurt, not dead, not missing. But then the woman cleared her throat. Mrs. Carter, we're here because your husband was involved in a matter earlier this morning that we need to ask you about. Okay, I whispered. What kind of matter? The man glanced toward the kitchen table, where Daniel's crumpled note still sat. Your husband came to the station around 5 a.m., he said. He asked to speak to an officer. He seemed distressed. I closed my eyes. That word again.
Distressed.
I wasn't there, the man continued. But according to the log, he said he needed to report something. Something about a long-term issue. Something he had kept hidden. My blood ran cold. A secret. A confession. And he'd gone to the police before he came home to me. What did he say? I whispered. He didn't finish, the officer replied. He got overwhelmed and left before filing a statement. The woman stepped forward slightly. But he did mention one thing. One name. That's why we're here. I felt my pulse jump in my neck. What name? I asked. They exchanged another look. Then the woman said quietly, his mother. A chill ran down my spine. The woman officer continued. He said, and this is written in the report, that he needed to finally tell the truth about Mother. He said he'd been carrying a burden for years. My breath faltered. His mother? I repeated faintly. She's gone. Yes, the man said. And your husband seemed emotionally shaken when he mentioned her. We wanted to check on you because his statement suggested there could have been tension or unresolved conflict involving her estate. Estate. The will. The inheritance. My throat tightened. I don't know what he meant, I whispered. He never said anything like that to me. That wasn't entirely true. But it wasn't a lie either. Because Daniel had never said it. He had only carried it. Quietly. Secretly. Enough that it was now leaking out around the edges. The woman softened her voice. Mrs. Carter, has anything happened recently that might have triggered strong emotions for him? Any family disputes? The will. Marianne's accusations. The attorney's meeting. His breakdown. His disappearance. But the words stuck in my throat. I don't know, I whispered again. We're not here to investigate you, the man assured me. We're just concerned. He looked like a man in crisis. I swallowed hard. You're sure he's okay? He left the station on foot, the woman said gently. We've been instructed to notify you if he returns or if we receive any information. He's not wanted for anything. He just needs help. I blinked back tears. After a few more questions, mostly procedural, the officers gave me a card. A number to call. A tired smile. A sympathetic look that told me they saw brokenness far too often. And then they left. The moment the door closed, I sank to my knees again. Not in shock this time. Not in fear. But in a dawning, trembling realization. Whatever Daniel had been hiding, whatever guilt he carried, whatever truth he'd been running from, it was big enough that he had tried to confess it to a police officer. And big enough that it drove his mother to leave her entire fortune, every last piece of her empire, to me instead of her own son. My breathing quickened. My hands shook. Because this wasn't just inheritance anymore. Wasn't anger. Wasn't family drama. Wasn't gossip and resentment. This was something that had consequences. Real ones. Legal ones. Moral ones. And if his mother had known the truth, if she had rewritten her will because of it, then whatever Daniel had done, it had changed the course of our entire lives. My phone buzzed suddenly, making me jump. A text message. Unknown number. Just 5 words. 5 words that sent my heart into my throat. I need to tell you. Tonight. The breath left my body. It was Daniel. He was coming back. And he was finally going to tell me everything. You don't sleep. You don't even try. You sit on the floor with your back against the couch, Daniel's letter in your hand, reading the same lines until they stop being words and become wounds. The apartment feels too still, like the air is holding its breath. Every sound makes you flinch, the elevator cables groaning, someone dropping something upstairs, a car door slamming outside. You keep expecting Daniel to walk through the door. He doesn't. By 4 a.m., Your chest feels hollow and heavy at the same time. Your eyes burn, but tears won't come anymore. You're beyond crying. You're in the place after tears, the place where emotion becomes sharp and quiet. A dull knock breaks the silence. Not loud, just deliberate. 3 slow taps. You stand, the exhaustion making your limbs feel underwater, and walk toward the door. For a second, your heart leaps. Daniel? But the silhouette visible through the peephole is wrong. Too slim. Shoulders narrower. Posture tense. It's the older woman from last week. The one who said she used to know Daniel. The one who looked at you like she was searching for something. You open the door only an inch. She looks worse than before. Eyes red. Hair disheveled. She's holding something wrapped in a scarf. "I'm sorry," she whispers. I shouldn't be here this late. "What do you want?" Your voice is raw, almost cracked. She takes a shaky breath. "I heard about Ellen," she says. "And I thought you should know what Daniel didn't tell you." Your pulse spikes, a wave of cold crawling up your spine. "What are you talking about?" She unwraps the scarf. Inside is a small, battered leather journal. The kind someone carries everywhere, the kind someone writes things in they don't want anyone else to read. Your throat tightens. "I found this when I was going through my sister's things," the woman says. "She had it hidden in a box. I didn't know why until yesterday." A beat passes. "My sister," she says, voice trembling, "was Daniel's mother." The world tilts. You grip the door frame to keep from sinking. "I thought Daniel had it," she continues, tears filling her eyes. "He was supposed to. But she must have kept it because she was afraid." You swallow hard. Afraid of what? She presses the journal into your hands. "Of who he really was before you met him," she whispers. "And of the people looking for him." Your stomach drops. "What people?" She shakes her head. "I don't know all of it. But whatever Ellen left him, it wasn't just money. And whatever Daniel is running from, it started long before you." Your heart beats so fast it hurts. "I loved him too," she adds quietly. "Once. A long time ago. That's why I'm giving you this. So you can finally understand what he's been hiding." Her voice cracks. "Read it. Before he comes back." You look down at the journal. It's warm from her hands, heavy with secrets. And as you touch the cover, something inside you breaks. Not from grief, but from the terrible, widening realization that the man you married might be a stranger, and that whatever truth is in this book may unravel everything you thought your life was built on. When you look up again, the woman is gone. The hallway is empty, and you're alone with the journal and the key to whatever Daniel has been running from. You sit at the kitchen table with the journal in front of you, hands trembling. For a long moment, you just stare at it. It feels wrong to open it, like you're breaking something sacred, but it also feels like the only way to breathe again. You undo the worn leather strap. The first page is covered in Ellen's handwriting. Not elegant, but strong. Determined. If Daniel ever reads this, it will mean the past has finally caught up with him. And if his wife reads it, "I am so sorry." Your breath catches. You turn the page. Ellen's words unravel a version of Daniel you never knew. A boy who ran away from a violent stepfather at 14. A teenager who worked under the table for a man who promised protection and delivered nothing but control. A young adult who got tangled in something that looked like a favor but became a debt he could never repay. And then the entries shift. He met a woman. Someone who sees him as he is, not what happened to him. He doesn't want her touched by the world he escaped. But they don't forget. They don't forgive debts. They wait. Your blood turns cold. Ellen wrote about the things she left him, not money, not a house, not assets, but evidence. Evidence that could free Daniel forever, or destroy powerful people who wouldn't let that happen quietly. You close the journal, heart pounding, and in that moment, the apartment door unlocks. Slowly, quietly, you turn. Daniel stands in the doorway, exhausted, unshaven, soaked from the rain, eyes filled with something like fear and relief all at once. He sees the journal in your hands. He goes pale. You weren't supposed to read that, he whispers. Your voice comes out cracked. I didn't have a choice. He steps forward, and for the first time since you've known him, truly known him, he looks vulnerable. I left because they found me again, he says. And I thought leaving you would keep you safe. You feel the weight of everything. The lies, the fear. The morning he left you a goodbye letter written with shaking hands. And yet, beneath it, something softer still survives. Something stubborn. Daniel, you say, I didn't marry the version of you who pretends everything is fine. I married you. Even the parts you're scared of.
His eyes shine.
You place the journal on the table between you. So tell me the rest, you say. All of it. No more running. Not from them, and not from me. A long silence. Then Daniel exhales, a release, a surrender, and pulls out a folded envelope from his jacket. The evidence, he says. Ellen's real legacy. If we take it to the attorney, they can protect us. But it means everything changes. You take his hand, then let it. For the first time, Daniel's shoulders drop, the weight finally shared. And together, tired, scared, but no longer alone, you step into the storm outside, choosing truth over fear, each other over silence, and a future built not on secrets, but on something stronger. Finally being on the same side. If you'd like to continue the universe, explore an epilogue, or start a new story with the same emotional tone, just tell me. Let's keep going. In the end, the truth didn't destroy us. It stripped us bare, yes. It forced every secret into the light, every wound open, every fear named aloud. But somehow, in the rawness of it all, Daniel and I found something we had forgotten, we once promised each other. We face life together, or not at all. The inheritance, the journal, the evidence, they weren't really about money or property or even justice. They were mirrors. They showed us who we truly were when we could no longer hide behind politeness or routine. They showed him the cost of running. They showed me the cost of silence. They showed both of us the cost of loving someone halfway. Ellen's final act wasn't cruelty. It wasn't revenge. It wasn't even a test that it was release. She freed her son from a past he kept chained to his ankle. She forced the truth into the world, no matter how violently it had to arrive. She handed Daniel a future, even if she didn't know how to give him tenderness. And, as for us, when we walked into the attorney's office the next morning, hand in hand, it didn't feel like stepping into a battlefield. It felt like stepping into a promise. A promise to tell the truth. A promise to stop running. A promise to choose each other, deliberately, even when it hurts. Especially when it hurts. What comes next won't be simple. Healing never is. But for the first time, the path ahead is honest. And honest is enough to build something real. Enough to rebuild us.